So 400 years ago, art was order. Over the next centuries, however, this order has transited into chaos. The task of art today is to bring chaos into order. You can clearly see how beautiful, refined works have now become complete chaos, and there's modern art and abstractism, and it's just a complete ideology change. So I'm an artist, an entrepreneur, a photographer, a graphic designer. At the age of 26, I founded my first company, a design studio. A year later, I founded the Emblem Art Gallery, followed by a t-shirt label, followed by a fashion and lifestyle label. So it seems like my life is in perfect order. As a schoolboy, I used to read a lot of detective novels. I used to read Famous Five, Hardy Boys, all these Secret Seven. And I was inspired to write my own book. I thought, okay, if these guys seem good, maybe I should too. So at 13, I wrote my first book. It sucked, I gotta say it sucked. Any which way, I wrote it. A year later, I read Shakespeare. I started reading a lot of Shakespeare, and I was inspired to write poetry. Now I thought I was going to grow up to become a writer, While still in school, I was very actively involved in sports. I was an athlete. I played football, I played hockey, I played all kinds of sports for my school team, for the state level. And now I thought I'm going to grow up to become a sports star. I wanted to become a pilot, I wanted to become a businessman, I wanted to become tons of things. Art was never one of the options at that point. So I continued to have all these dreams about what I wanted to do, but it wasn't really clear how to go about it. I went to college, I studied accountancy and economics, again, not what I had really anticipated. I wasn't pretty thrilled there studying commerce, so I took up a part-time course in graphic design. I figured this is cool, this is fun. I started enjoying the whole color and not having to use a book and not having to sort of mark things and do the conventional school of thought with education. So I thought, this is great, I don't need books anymore. So I decided I'm going to quit college. And I applied to the National Institute of Design. To my dismay, however, I got like an immediate rejection. Get out of here. I tried again, not to be demotivated, but apparently it wasn't meant to be, and I got another rejection. I got shortlisted this time. So I thought maybe I'm inching towards it and maybe I'm getting better at it, but I got a no again. I went through college, I graduated, I moved to Bombay. I'm originally from Pune, so I moved to Bombay. I joined as an intern with the television channel as a designer. Over there, I remember the first 6 months that I was with them, I got all my work trashed. My boss kept used to stare out every printout every day in and day out, I'd churn out something cool and think, okay, I'm getting good at this, and my boss every morning would stare it up and say, piece of junk, try again. So it started taking a toll on me. I started wondering what the hell's going wrong. So I figured maybe the right thing to do is go back to school, get an education in art. So I started researching for schools, and I figured, okay, NIT gave me 2 rejections, I could be third time lucky, right? But they had this clause about, if you're 21, you can't apply, and I had already become 21. So that didn't happen either. So I continued schools. I eventually landed up getting admission from my best available resources of finance and probably my portfolio. Even I went to Singapore. My memory of landing in Singapore was very vivid. I was really elated, I was excited, I was in a new place, I was anxious, nervous, afraid. I had a whole barrage of emotions running through my head. But just 4 weeks into being into school, I realized that I was a complete misfit. I was a social misfit, cultural misfit, economically I was a misfit, financially. I even got asked ridiculous questions by one of the dorks over there who said, do you go to school in India on an elephant? Initially you start, being all patriotic and wanting to defend the country, and like, what's wrong with you, But then after a point of time, we just make a joke about it. Of course, I went to India to school on an elephant. I have a couple of them in my backyard, and I feed them sugar cane, and made a big joke about it. Somebody asked me if you'd watch television. So you just play along and figure what's the point of getting bogged down by this. Some guys made fun of my accent because I was Indian. I don't know. What are you talking about? So yeah, I was being ridiculed all the time. So I had to sort of change my focus from being depressed by this nonsense and focus on my schoolwork. So I started concentrating so much on my schoolwork that I turned into a complete geek. Yeah, okay, well, what can you say? So, you don't have to be distracted by that. So the only thing going well for me at that point was my grades. I was doing pretty well, and at that point it was bad enough being a social outcast. I also had to live on a stringent budget. I used to go to nearby Gurudwara to eat free food. I used to bum off my friends off and say, oh, can I have a bite? Of 10 friends, I'd eat my meal, like, can I get one bite, can I get one bite? So I used to fill my stomach. So to pay stationery and my rents, I kind of did all kinds of things, and often my faculty at this point, if they knew this, would kill me, but I often did homework for my classmates so that I could pay my rents, and they'd pay me like $100 each time I do their assignment, so I could live comfortably. So, at this point I have to narrate this incident here. Often on my weekends while I was in Singapore, I used to go to IKEA, mostly for the very cheap hot dog. Actually, no, for the beautiful, the decor, the furniture, the art over there. So, while walking through one of these alleys one morning, I chanced upon an Andy Warhol inspired pop art print of Audrey Hepburn. I'm guessing most of you are familiar with the very famous Breakfast at Tiffany's portrait. So I chanced upon this work and I fell in love with it. I was really mesmerized by it. It was a very simple work, but I thought there was something really beautiful about it. I wanted to buy it. I was really keen to buy it, but it was about, if I recall correctly, $75 or so. Now in hindsight, it seems like a paltry sum of money, but as a student already living on those ridiculous budgets, it would have been a luxury and I could never afford this. But it made a very strong impression on my mind. I was already studying about Andy Warhol in school and the entire pop culture, mass culture, anti-elitism. So I thought, okay, this is really cool, I must have this. It didn't happen. It didn't happen. Now, I was here in Singapore to study communication design, but I had started falling in love with fine art. After my foundation studies, we were expected to fill a form and choose your major. I was here again, like I said, to study communication design, but I was contemplating choosing fine art, so I took fine art as my first option and I walked to school to submit my form. While walking to school, what seemed like an eternally long walk, I had these conflicting ideas, am I doing the right thing? Should I become an artist? Should I become an advertising guy who makes, can look at Priyanka Chopra backstage and things like that. So I thought, hey, if I am going to make art as treacherous as this is a self-portrait I made back then. So I figured looking at myself like this versus looking at Priyanka Chopra backstage would have been a much better option. So I chickened out of being an artist and I went on to study communication design. Thankfully for me, I graduated with a great academic record and like an impeccable record. So I figured this was the right thing to do and I was meant to do this. So on account of my academic record, I was offered a residentship over there and I became a permanent resident. I lived there for a few years and in a very recession hit market, I struggled to find a job. Eventually when I did, I figured that I think I want to go back to India and do my own thing. Why am I wasting my talent with somebody else? So I quit in the middle of just when things had started to look up for me because I was just going through a roller coaster, but that's just the way I guess life takes you. You go up and down and you make a couple of choices that when you look back are right or wrong, you can only contemplate. So I moved back, I came back to India. I was again a new beginning for me, it was a new chapter. I had come back and I'm going to start my own company. That's when I founded my design studio. So I was here, but I had been gone too long. I was disconnected with the entire art culture and design scene in India. I had no inroads into the industry, I had no godfather, and basically I had no work. I was idle. So I began to paint, I began to doodle, I began to write, I began to just while away my time or try to occupy myself from not going into sort of a depression. 2 lines that I would write at that point, little did I know that these 2 lines would go on to inspire what would become my most selling series of works. Then, when you take away all the color from life, there's nowhere to hide but behind the shadows. What you see is a reality, the truth in black and white. These 2 lines that I wrote then inspired me to start painting my next series of works, at that point my first series of works. And while in school I had taken up fine art as an elective, not a major, but I studied knife drawing, and I was very fascinated by the female form. Most men probably are. But I was looking at it from an artistic perspective, and I was completely mesmerized. I thought it was scintillating, it was sensuous, it was a great vulnerability, and all kinds of emotions ran through my head when I looked at the nude form of a woman. I was really excited by it from an artistic subject. It wasn't a naked commodity, but God's art. I thought, and those two lines put together with all my emotions, I started to paint this. A year had passed, and a couple of months, maybe half a year or so, and I still had no work. My design studio still had no work. So I continued to paint. By the end of the year, I had, a large body of works, and at this point, I remember the Andy Warhol print, which I could now own because not that I had money, but because I could make an imitation and buy it, and have one for myself. So on the left-hand side is the original work, and I made myself an imitation on the right-hand side. So I figured, oh great, this was my first foray into pop art. So I continued to paint, and through the course of the months, I had a large body of work, some black and white series of nudes titled Nowhere to Hide, and some of the pop art portraits. So somebody at that point encouraged me to have an exhibition, and I went looking for galleries. But at that point, I realized that all these galleries were looking for an artist who had credibility, who had formal education in fine art, which I didn't, who had basically a brand value. I had neither of these. So I had to sort of either create myself an identity, a brand image, or I had to have an inroad, or I had to have a godfather or somebody. I had nothing going for me. And I was writing to all these galleries, sending in my CVs and my works and saying, hey, take a look and give me a show. So, but I got no calls, and I figured, okay, you're not going to get me a space, I'm going to start my own art gallery, and then I will compete with you. So I figured, if you don't have a job, you create a job. So I went back and I started my own art gallery. I understood that there might be several artists like me who just needed the encouragement or the motivation or some sort of a push to get a show, but galleries, because there was such a commercial business at that point, were not willing to encourage the younger guys. So I founded the gallery of this thumb rule that I would showcase artists only who would have no more than 3 shows. So we started sourcing for people from initially Pune, then interior Maharashtra, all across India, and we got a lot of artists who were not just young guys, but somebody who was 50 years old, senior artists, professors even, but who never had the confidence or the courage to do that. So we sort of brought them to the foreground and said, why don't you have a show with us? So that's just a glimpse of the gallery. And again, we didn't make it just a regular gallery. We walked into a room full of paintings. We made it very interactive. Also, we started opening it at 6 p.m. when people got off work. So we encouraged larger footfall, and we changed the entire viewing dynamics of it. It was a beautiful space, and thanks to this, the Emblem Studios came to the foreground, and the design studio started doing well, and the gallery started doing well, and things started to fall into place. So just when you think there was an order and it was all going simultaneously, chaos, the order, it was all working hand in hand. At that point, I was painting a lot of Hollywood-inspired pop art portraits, and I figured I should do something more Indian-centric. So I at that point had the honor to showcase my works with the original works of Raja Ravi Verma. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with it, but he's the legend. He's India's Da Vinci. So he's been dead 100 years, and I think it was 160th birth anniversary when I had the opportunity to showcase my works alongside his. So this sort of got a lot of credibility as an artist, and suddenly the critics were talking about it. Okay, maybe this guy can paint, and he's got some sort of so there was a sort of brand building exercise that took place by chance at that point. And things started to fall into place thanks to that. And I was then invited to create some sort of work that required nothing more than care. I was asked to create a work that was 40 foot by 40 foot, and they said, do it in 3 minutes. I figured, you got to be kidding me, that's not remotely possible. So they said, and not just that, you have to do something that is never done before. So now I had the pressure for these guys who said, do a show, do it in 3 minutes, and do something that's never been done. I'm going to show you a little video of what I actually did at that point. and it was just chaos. And when you think about it, you're thinking, okay, it's just a car driving around. But if I may say so myself, this is what these works actually turned out to look like. So there was a sense of beauty and order to it, from what just looks like, four wheels driving around. So not only was I doing something that was never done before, it was also about creating something that was actually going to have a sense of order amidst that chaos. But to see this show, I started gaining a lot of repute, and I got invited by a gallery in New York. The thing was always, because I was doing something that was conventional, I was always expected to continue with that. And I came up with this series of works which went to New York, and I remember my parents telling me, why do you always paint naked women, and what obsession do you have with this nudity, and you're just throwing color on some naked girl all the time, and get a life, join your father's business. And I thought, okay, I get that all the time. So and on the contrary, all my friends started saying, why don't you call me to your studio so we can meet all these naked women? But yeah, too bad that didn't happen. So these works went to New York, and they started selling really well. I had 5 sellout shows back to back in the span of 2 years. I was just churning out works. Basically, I was just throwing paint on naked girls, if you think about it. And it started doing really well. So the thing is, when you look back, in hindsight, your life, everything fits together like a glove. In the year 2008, I remember painting only 12 works. I usually paint about 40 works on average. So I had painted only about 12 works that entire year. This is one of the works. Now, when you look at this work, it appears to be just a bunch of chaos. But the thing about all these experiences that when you connect all the blocks together, it comes into order. So I would encourage you all. To let there be chaos. You will find your order. Thank you.